The menstrual cycle has been kind of left out of conversations for so long.
I feel like the max that men learn about is that we bleed once a month.
If you can learn how her hormones operate, she's gonna be like, wow, I have the best boyfriend on the planet.
Our hormones can impact our mood, our energy, our stress levels, even how we feel connected to our partners. He said, well, this sounds like one more thing that men have to learn about. But I think that's fair. Do you birth children?
Do you think that there is actually a correlation between arguments and relationships to hormones that we were never taught about?
Most of the misunderstandings definitely the luteal phase. Estrogen can impact your serotonin levels, your dopamine levels for more confidence, more reassurance, making you be like the star. Serve your own show.
You might think something is wrong with you when you're like, I'm just not horny this week.
Move away from like what is wrong with me to what's going on with me. And that takes away like the shame, honestly, that can come with it.
What is like the very first step that someone should take if like they're like brand new to this, realizing all these things like in hindsight? What do they do? If you've ever wondered why you have the same fight with your boyfriend every month at the same time of the month when you started tracking it, this episode is for you. How many arguments in relationships are actually arguments, and how many of them have to do with the fact that your hormones are shifting, your buffer and your stress tolerance is different, your libido and your sex drive is different during different phases of your cycle? And if you don't know that, you might be fighting a lot more than you need to in your relationship. Women's hormones shift week by week. We have 4 different cycle phases, and each one drives changes in your mood, your sex drive, your energy, your stress tolerance. But most of us were never taught about how the menstrual cycle really works. And most of our partners don't know how it works either. And it's easy for your partner to sometimes, or yourself to interpret that as losing interest, moodiness, disinterest, and even sometimes rejection. So if you're ready to see if your relationship problems might be related to your cycle, and maybe you don't have to fight after all, this episode is for you. This episode is about rewriting that story because I believe that when couples understand the cycle, they experience better empathy, better communication, and even a deeper connection. So today we're asking, can cycle syncing really save relationships? Let's find out. Hi, my name is Natalia. I'm the host of the Ask Lively podcast, the show where we have real, unfiltered conversations about women's health, hormones, and living in sync with your body. We're bringing on experts to answer your questions and answers about your body that you should have been taught years ago so that you can take control of your health, your cycle, and your life. Today, we're being joined by Dr. Tabitha Laurie. I am so excited to have you on. She is a licensed naturopathic doctor, professor of anatomy and physiology, women's health advocate. She specializes in hormone health, fertility, and sustainable weight management, helping women better understand and work with their bodies in every stage of their life. Through her practice, Adore Naturopathic Medicine, Dr. Tabitha helps women struggling with conditions such as fibroids, PCOS, endometriosis, correct hormone imbalances so that they can experience healthy periods, freedom from pain, avoid surgery, preserve fertility, and live radiantly. Dr. Tabitha, I'm so excited to have you on. Thank you for making the time to do this. I know you have such a busy schedule, so thank you.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So I love to start the podcast by asking all of our guests, if cycle syncing had been taught in school, how do you think your life would be differently?
I think I would have had more compassion for my body growing up if cycle syncing had been taught. I think I lived with a lot of shame when it came to mood changes. And had I been taught that, hey, my hormones are just shifting, this won't be forever, there are things that I can do to maybe improve my mood during my cycle, better manage my stress, better manage anxiety that may present, I would have had a lot more compassion and empathy. And I hate to say it to my 3 sisters, I would have had more compassion and empathy for you 3 too, because they had their menses before me. And of course, if I'm not experiencing it and I'm like, why does she have an attitude? I just kind of want to play. I wasn't understanding that maybe her hormones were just shifting and she couldn't be as kind and as gentle with me. So I'm sorry, Jennifer, Lisa, and Kendra.
No, I love that. And I feel like that's very real and relatable. Honestly, like I didn't understand how much your hormones impact like everything in your life until I was in my 20s, which I feel like is still young. Like I meet people all the time who are like, I didn't know till I was like almost 30 because nobody tells you this. And so I remember even as an athlete feeling like so like kind of like you were talking about with shame of just being like, well, last week I was able to lift heavy and run far, and this week like I'm going backwards on my progress, or like there was a point in time where I was like, am I bipolar? Like what is happening here with just like the moodiness? And that so real what you're saying. And I think a lot of women can probably relate to that.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And then it also would have given us a language to be able to explain yourself, especially with partners. Like, okay, well, at this phase of my cycle, I may need more rest. At this particular phase of my cycle, I'm feeling very energetic. So maybe we can go out and have a good time.
Absolutely. No, and I remember when I first got into a serious relationship, and before I understood about like my luteal phase, and I'd be like, why am I always having like I always am feeling icked out. I'm always feeling like I'm starting to pick fights and pick arguments. Like at this, I didn't realize it was at the same time each month. But once I started like actually tracking, I noticed so many patterns. So I'm really excited to like dive into this today. I think this is a question that most of us women have been, and partners. I feel like this is an episode that people are hopefully going to be sending their boyfriends, their husbands, their spouses. Because I feel like this is a conversation that needs to be talked about more, not just with women, but just overall. So let's start with this. Do you think that there is actually a correlation between arguments and relationships coming down to hormones that we were never talked about? Like, what are your thought process with that?
I do think there can be a correlation with arguments or tension as it relates to the hormones we weren't talked about, because our hormones can impact our or influence our mood, our energy, our stress levels, the way that we tolerate stress, and even how we feel connected to our partners. But I do want to give a big disclaimer, and I know the men on the podcast, hopefully you're listening in, are going to agree and probably hit us with the fingers that the young kids are doing nowadays.
Yeah, everyone. I
Not
love that.
every argument can be chalked up to hormones. So I do want to put that disclaimer, and I don't want to say a pass, but it can be a pass for every woman to use that as an unjustifiable excuse for bad behavior. So I will say, can hormones impact our relationships? Absolutely. Because again, our cycles can influence our mood, our energy, our stress tolerance, and how we communicate and connect to our partners. But that's not a pass for bad behavior. Okay. But hormones can complicate things.
I love that you're prefacing the conversation with this, because I think a lot of times it's so easy to take stuff like this and use it as like a scapegoat of like, well, I'm in my luteal phase, so I'm going to treat everyone around me poorly and just like blame it on the fact that my stress hormones are low. And
Exactly.
I love that you're prefacing the conversation with that. I think that's very important. So I love it.
No, absolutely. And I was speaking to one of my friends, and he said, well, this sounds like one more thing that men have to learn about. And I said, well, yeah, it is. But I think that's fair. Do you birth children?
Yeah.
Do you have to carry them for 9 months? I think it's fair to just learn about them instead of having to actually deal with them. But yeah, I definitely want to put that disclaimer out to all of the men that are listening. This is not to give us a pass for bad behavior, but it is to shed light on the things that do impact us. But again, sometimes it's not your luteal phase. Maybe you're just with the wrong person. Maybe you guys lack, effective communication or emotional or relational intelligence. So those all play a part of it. But there is how do I want to word this? There is a correlation with our fluctuations of hormones and how they impact us. So it's very much real, but still not justification for poor behavior.
Before we dive back in, I just wanted to say this. If you've been learning from these episodes, loving the guests, or just feeling seen from these conversations, do us a quick favor and please tap the follow button wherever you are listening to this. It helps us more than you know, and it means the world to us. When you follow the show, that lets us bring on even more experts, answer the questions that you care about, and keep growing the lively community with the support that you deserve. That's it. That's the ask. One tap to follow us is a huge step in helping more women understand their bodies. Okay, Now grab your tea, your matcha, your coffee, and let's get back to the episode. Absolutely. And also like I've seen the same thing in patterns in conversation where if a girl is bringing up like a real like tension point in a relationship or like something that exactly like what you said, maybe like bad emotional patterns or like real problems that are going on and being like, well, you're on your period or you're in your luteal phase, so you're just being dramatic. So I think with that being said, why do you think that the menstrual cycle has been kind of left out of conversations for like about intimacy or relationships for so long?
Well, women's health just in general has never been a big priority when it comes to medical education. I feel like the max that men learn about is that we bleed once a month. They may even know the range, maybe 1 to 5 days, but I feel like that's one of the ones that they do pay attention to for intimacy purposes, that at least 5 days out of the month I may be out of commission, depending on who you are and what you're into. But honestly, they just grew up learning that we have a menses once a month. They didn't learn about the rhythms. They didn't learn about how it impacts our energy, our mood, our connection. So honestly, it just wasn't a priority.
Yeah. No, and I feel like with that, like going back to like the way that you were prefacing this conversation is really just like the whole point is for empathy of like, don't you want to understand like what your how your partner operates so that you can best be there to support them. The same way I feel like you learn about love languages and like how do I make you feel the most love? Like how can I know if you're having like a hard day? It's just like it's not a like you said, like a quiz to make sure that you're like filling out just for the sake of like putting it on a to-do list, but like just another tool to help understand your partner and how they're operating in the world better.
Absolutely. And for the betterment of the couple as a whole. Like, aren't we
Exactly.
team? Aren't we partners? Isn't this teamwork?
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so how often do you see like in relationships like people misinterpreting like cycle driven changes of like moodiness and disinterest when it's really just like hormone shifting versus I know you said earlier like how do you distinguish the two? Like how do you know and I guess what are those patterns that you see in the cycle?
So if we're going to talk about the cycle, there's 4 different phases. So usually, well, I'll just go over the 4 different phases.
Yeah.
So for the 4 phases, a normal menstrual cycle, we'll always see that on average is 28 days. But in actuality, it ranges anywhere from 24 days to 35 days. That's a normal cycle length. But if you look at a period app or if you look at oral contraception, people that take birth control pills, it's usually 28 days. So we'll just go on the basis of it being on average 28 days. So the menstrual phase is day 1 to day 5 on average, but some women may bleed shorter for shorter length of time and some may bleed longer, but we'll just go and say that it's 5 days. So during those 5 days, your estrogen and progesterone, both of those are going to be low. With those being low, you're going to have low energy. You may need to rest more. You may even need a little bit more reassurance. And I'm sure a lot of women can identify with this. So think when you're bleeding, you're actively having your bleed. And when you're tracking your cycle, cycle day 1 is the first day that you bleed. So cycle day 1 to 5, and again, varies depending on your cycle length. That's when your estrogen and your progesterone are the lowest. Low estrogen, low progesterone, low energy, low libido, low mood, things like that. Then when you move into the follicular phase, so we went menstrual, now we're moving to follicular. That's going to be days 6 through 13 on average. Everybody is different. So during that time, now you're going to have a rise of estrogen. Now we're going to get more creative, more optimism, more openness. So here, as estrogen is rising steadily, our mood is starting to boost. Progesterone is going to pretty much stay low here. And we're waiting to ovulate because that's the next phase. So with ovulation, and pay attention to ovulation. If you're not trying to conceive, be careful with sexual intercourse. Okay. So with ovulation, day 14 on average, so mid-cycle, you're going to have a peak of estrogen. So now estrogen is at its highest. So you're going to want to be a social butterfly. You're going to be confident. You're going to want to go out. Your strength is high. Your stamina is great. Your cognitive sharpness is in tune. You're just feeling almost like your best self. And when it comes to libido, it's peaking. The whole point of ovulation is for us to be able to have a child. Honestly, the whole point of a menses, of a period, the whole cycle is for you to essentially prepare your uterus, your uterine lining for pregnancy. So let's say ovulation, you don't get pregnant during ovulation. Now you're moving over to the luteal phase, and this is day 15 to 28. So now progesterone is rising. You're starting to feel calm at first. You may feel a little bit more unstable. Estrogen is going to fluctuate. It's going to be low. Then it peaks just a little bit, but then it goes down. Both of those decrease. And when those drop low again, that's when you're repeating your menstrual cycle. So it goes menstrual cycle, follicular, ovulation, luteal. Feeling iffy? Okay.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say what's really wild to me is like my mom and I had this conversation probably like a month ago, and it was so interesting that she is like in her mid 40s, and she's starting to enter like premenopause or menopause, and still really doesn't know like the 4 cycle phases, or like never really like understood them or like tracked them, because again, at least they're from Eastern Europe, like in her generation and where she comes from, like nobody talks about this. So I always wonder, like, when you're outlining just hormonally, like how these things impact your energy, your sex drive, your libido, your mood. I'm like, if you don't know that these changes happen in your body, and nobody ever told you that they happen in your body, and maybe you haven't tracked to understand like what happens in your body, like how confusing might it be to like not have those tools, and like, let's say in your sex life, be curious, like if you don't know, like you might think something is wrong with you when you're like, I'm just not horny this week. Yeah. And so I'm really passionate about this topic and like talking about it, because I feel like if you don't know, you can feel broken.
Yes, broken, feel abnormal. Like, what is wrong with me? And I always tell my patients like to move away from like what is wrong with me to what's going on with me, like what's happening with me, because then that takes away like that shame, or even like the shame, honestly, that can come with it. And especially if your mom's moving towards like the perimenopausal phase where you're losing that estrogen, and estrogen gives you that that confidence and that spike and that spark, essentially, she may really be feeling it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think along with that, what you said, like taking the shame out of it, realizing like there's my body is here trying to help me. Like, how do I work with it rather than working against it? So I love what you're saying. So let's go back a little bit into ovulation. I know like all the memes online and all the TikToks, they're like, oh, this is, I know men, if you track your cycle, this is when it takes you on date night. And I know like ovulation for some women, it's like some people experience ovulation pain and like cramps. So like I don't want to like make it feel like everyone, like if that's not your experience, like that's a bad thing. But for most people, like what's happening biologically in ovulation that makes it such a main character moment to like go on your date?
So main character moment for ovulation, and definitely the memes where the person's like getting jiggy, and getting seductive. So with ovulation, and I haven't spoken about FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone. So luteinizing hormone, if anyone's ever tracked their ovulation and they have like the sticks, the urine sticks, usually you're tracking LH surge to see if you're going to ovulate. So LH, luteinizing hormone, triggers the egg to be released. So, and also with ovulation, you're having that peak of LH, and you're having that peak of estrogen. So with estrogen, that's that confidence booster. So estrogen actually acts on multiple receptors in the body. And I think a lot of people only isolate sex hormones to acting on like your ovaries, your uterus, but actually it acts on the brain as well. Estrogen can impact your serotonin levels, your dopamine levels, all of these things that operate inside of the brain for more confidence, more reassurance, making you be like the star of your own show, helping you with motivation, reward, all of the things. So I really want us to really in on estrogen too, and like hormones, because we always just isolate it to our menses, but it impacts your blood flow. It impacts all of these different things. There are so many different estrogen receptors all throughout the body, not just isolated to our reproductive system.
We love her. We love estrogen. She's amazing.
No, and we want her to stay around for a long while.
For a long, long while. I know sometimes like when I'm ovulating, I'm like, do do men like feel like this every day? Like, are they just like on their, I don't know. I don't know how it works.
You
So
know,
answer this for, yeah.
a little bit of jealousy, not gonna lie, because they don't have these fluctuations. So
Right.
no, they probably do feel like that all of the time. Hopefully, God, God willing.
Yeah.
But men do have issues with their testosterone, and when they do have lower testosterone, that can impact their drive, especially. What else? Bone health, mental clarity. That can cause them to be
Yeah.
sterile. They won't be able to reproduce children. So we have more
Yeah.
hormones that can impact us, but they do have testosterone, which can be low and cause them to not be the star of the show.
Yeah. I also think within that, I think that has been like a really huge shift for me to realize like, okay, like coming back to this conversation, which I feel like is going to be a repeated pattern like throughout this episode, but just like there's something really beautiful about the way that our hormones are decided and the way that they're made. And I think making this shift for me of like, I'm not just a little man, but like I'm a cyclical creature. And there's actually something that I'm like on the flip side, because we were talking, like how cool is it that how like men get to be stable every single day. They have a 24-hour cycle. Their energy doesn't like woo all over the place. Like they're not like they don't have 4 different brains like every week of the month.
Exactly.
So it's like, but then on the flip side, I'm like, how beautiful is it to like they don't get to experience the seasons. It's like when I talk to my friends who live in like Hawaii or somewhere where there's like only one season. Like it sounds really great until you realize like you don't get that period of like slowing. Like there's something really beautiful to it that I'm like, maybe they're missing out too. Yeah.
Yeah, you can definitely think about it that way, the highs and the lows. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is for endurance and perseverance.
Exactly. Okay, we're going to get back to the conversation really quickly. But first, I want to take a brief moment to tell you about a tool that can really help you with understanding your body. If you've ever wished that you could truly understand your body, Lively can help. It's the most personalized women's health companion for your cycle, hormones, and every stage of womanhood, from your first period and pregnancy to menopause. Finally understand your cycle phase and what your body needs, sync your workouts and nutrition, plan for pregnancy, and make sense of your hormones with tools made by women health experts. Get daily tips for your energy, mood, and well-being, plus a private space that your partner can use to better support you. All with privacy that you can trust. Trusted by millions of women worldwide. Try it free for 7 days on the App Store or Google Play. Search Lively, create your account, and start living in sync with your body. I use Lively. I love it. I've used it for multiple years now, and it is probably my favorite tool that I have. Okay, back to the episode. Okay, so on the flip side, let's get into the luteal phase. Like a lot of women say that they feel a little bit more inward, snappy, exhausted. Like I've heard it described as like your inner winter. Can we let's talk about the luteal phase. What happens there?
So this is where progesterone is gonna, I guess, take center stage. So with progesterone can act on your GABA receptors, which allow you to experience more calmness. Actually, with a lot of my patients who experience extreme anxiety, I always check their progesterone too. And I check their progesterone because progesterone gives you that calm state. So maybe when you're feeling that more inward form, that's because you're acting on your GABA receptors. You're a lot more calm. You're telling the body, hey, it's time to reset. Now, hopefully, it resets the way that it should, but it's a little bit more sedating. So you're definitely feeling more sedated in the luteal phase. And then you can also feel a little bit more hungry because your metabolism's increasing. And you're getting ready to eventually start the cycle all over again, because right after the luteal phase, here comes the menstrual phase. So it's back to square one.
Yeah. Okay, so in your experience, like how do these hormones shift in these different phases play out in real life in relationships? Where do you see couples like misunderstanding each other most often?
Most of the misunderstandings, definitely the luteal phase. I would say that because of the inwardness, you may feel like, is my partner rejecting me because maybe she doesn't want to be as intimate and she doesn't want to converse as much. And then that's where it comes in. If you're actually tracking a cycle and you're in the know, that can benefit your relationship. You can have better verbiage to explain what's actually happening with you. Like, hey, no, it's just this phase of my cycle. Here, let me show you like what actually happens. And honestly, we should give men more credit. They will be engaged if you actually strike the conversation, majority.
Yeah.
majority
No,
low.
I actually, I really, I want to 100% agree with what you're saying. I think it's been really cool to see like my boyfriend. He loves tracking my cycle and like getting to like it was fascinating for him to get. And I think a lot of guys, like a lot of my guy friends, like just this last weekend we had two of his friends in town, and I was telling them, listen, like if you're dating a girl, like here are the four phases of her cycle. You know, maybe she doesn't even know, but like if you can learn how like her hormones operate, like she's gonna be like, wow, I have the best boyfriend on the planet. Like,
Exactly.
right? So I 100% agree. I think there's a lot of guys out there who I think just in general we don't. It's just not known about. Like it's not that people don't want to be there for you as much as like they just don't know. And even for yourself, like so many of my girlfriends, like no one teaches us this in school, right? So we just don't know. But yeah, I agree.
Very unfortunate. So even as I'm teaching anatomy and physiology, I take a lot of time just explaining the hormones more than just what, textbooks tells us. I talk to my students because they're going to be future nurses to really teach them what is happening in their bodies. Majority of the class, like today started my new class, I had one male in the class. So it's primarily female. So it's super important to be in the know.
I love that. You sound like you'd be an amazing teacher. I'm like, I would love to sit in your class. But
It's so much fun. I love it. And thank you.
yeah. So, okay, do you have an example of how a couple understanding the cycle or awareness of your cycle can completely like just shift the way that people navigate conflict or intimacy in their relationship?
I will say a lot of my patients, because I do a lot of PCOS, fibroids, endometriosis, a lot of my patients unfortunately were forced to track their cycle if they were having fertility issues. But so imagine already having fertility issues. So that could potentially be a strain on the relationship, stressor, right? Stress induced, very, very sad, and can potentially be detrimental for a lot of couples. So you already have that. But when they started tracking the cycle, a lot of the male partners were like, wow, this really helped me get a bigger picture of everything she's been going through, especially as they're doing fertility treatments. So it was like, okay, well, now that explains why, once a month she felt this way, or I knew I had to give her a little bit more space here. And then with our patients who have PMDD, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with PMDD, but it's premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It's essentially like very extreme PMS that can be marked by extreme anxiety, depression, suicidal ideations for some of my patients, extreme mood swings. So in their luteal phase, it is extreme. So when I have patients who have PMDD, I definitely urge their partners to sit in during the appointments so that I can explain it better to them, so they can truly understand what's happening in their body. Like her progesterone is almost at a low here. So she's feeling very anxious. She's feeling very depressed. Here are the things that can help her. And not just prescription medications. It can be supplements, it can be herbs, it can be nutraceuticals, all of these things. And even as you track your cycle, there are different nutrients that can be used for different phases of your cycle.
It's so interesting because it's something you can't see on the outside, where like you can't see someone's hormone levels, like, right? So I feel like it's so like you were saying, like having your partner sit and actually understand, like, hey, like the hormones that normally buffer stress and help you with like resilience or emotional regulation, like they're not there, and you can't see that on the outside, right? Like if you break your arm or you break your leg, like you can see that, but you can't see that when it comes to like hormonal imbalances or things that are happening like within the body. So with that being said, I know you were mentioning like tips of what people can do like with their cycle. So let's talk about partners and how they can start syncing the relationship with the cycle. If there's a partner listening here, or maybe a girl or her boyfriend or whoever, and they're listening, they're like, how can I use this information to optimize my life and my relationship? What do you think?
So track your cycle. There's so many different wonderful apps, a Lively app for sure, but there's apps that you can use, and you can even give your partner permission to actually view in, so they can be on their devices as well. So chime in, look. So again, if we're going on the menstrual phase, we'll call this the winter of the cycle. Okay, winter's coming. Or what did they say on Game of Thrones?
Winter is coming.
Winter's coming.
Exactly
winter's coming. So If you're in the winter, little pro tip. So maybe your partner would need a little bit more downtime. You know, you're bleeding out of your vagina. Nothing sounds fun about that. Days 1 to 5, right? So maybe you have a lighter schedule. In focusing conversations, don't bring me anything heavy on my menstrual. I'm just going to be, just don't. Okay. I don't have the capacity right now. Everything's low. Progesterone's low. We're in a panic here. Estrogen's low. Then the follicular phase. So now we see that our season's changing. We went from winter. After winter comes spring, right? So now things are starting to be on the upward swing. We have our estrogen coming up a little bit more. So now maybe you want to go be a little bit more active, be a little bit more adventurous. Try something new. Go to a concert. And now you can have a little bit more difficult conversations if needed. Moving on to ovulation. So now we're from winter, spring, now we're in summertime. Everybody loves a hot girl summer. Okay. So now we have a high surge of our estrogen and our LH peaks. Confidence is high. We can take over the world. And if you're trying to conceive, obviously this is the best time. Now is the time to tap in, as the young kids say, tap in. Okay. So now you tap in.
You go on top of this. I love it. She's like, nothing they do.
What do they do?
Yeah,
I'm so old. I'm 35. So technically, my friends get so upset. I'm always like, I'm a middle-aged woman. I'm not a middle-aged woman, but I'm like, I'm a middle-aged woman. And they get so upset. I'm like, we're middle-aged. So when it comes to ovulation, now you're on top of the world. Now you want to schedule your intimacy if you want to have kids. Anything that is going to positively impact your life, do those things. Lean in, have more social time. Then the luteal phase, now we have the progesterone swooping on in. So now we're a little bit more calm, metabolism's high, you're inward focused. So this is the autumn, things are slowing down. You may be more reflective. So maybe instead of going out, have a cozy day in. So these are some tips that you can use. So plan big conversations and date nights in the follicular phase, ovulation phase. Build on gentleness during the luteal phase, the menstrual phase. And then swap out where you want to say, like, what's wrong with you or what's going on. Just kind of like ask gently, like, what's going on in your cycle? You notice she's a little bit more snippy, like, what phase are you in your cycle? But pro tip, if you're already tracking, you won't have to ask.
I agree.
Won't have to ask.
Do's and don'ts. I'm like, don't say, like, every time you have an argument, are you on your period or are you about to start your period? Because it's like, I've had someone ask me that when I'm like, I'm ovulating right now. Like, this is a real conversation. Like, don't make it.
No, it's just annoying.
No, but I think the other thing is, I feel like everyone at home right now, like, I'm thinking, like, writing down, I'm like, what date nights do I want to do in each phase? Like, I feel like you outlined it so perfectly. I'm like, and it's so accurate. Like, I think back on this last month and I'm like, you know, I was like the most social butterfly. Like, I wanted to go out and like have dinner and like hang out with friends and be in group settings and like, and then it's like clockwork for me. Like 10 days before my period, I'm like, I'm not an introverted person and I want to stay home and like binge watch my movies. Like, I don't invite me anywhere. Don't take me out. So, I love that. And like you said, if you're already tracking, you can plan ahead and, you know, like, I'm showing up with like popcorn and we're having a night and you don't have to ask. So,
and they say if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. Stay ready.
Just the shorts from this are going to be so good. You are crushing this. I just wanted to say you have an amazing personality.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Tabitha, if someone is listening to this conversation for the first time, they're thinking like, wow, I've never heard this, didn't know about this, was bringing hard conversations up when my girlfriend didn't have capacity for that. What is like the very first step that someone should take if like they're like brand new to this, realizing all these things, like in hindsight, what do they do?
I would say just start tracking. Awareness is step one. So once you're aware and you know the do's and the don'ts, then you can apply, right? You can't apply what you don't know. So now that you know that there's this cyclic trend that happens during your woman's menses, maybe you can be more supportive. And again, this is not to say we're pushing all of these new things that you need to do, but in order to have a successful relationship, it requires work on both ends. So the more that you show up for each other for the betterment of your relationship, the better. And that boils down to relational intelligence, emotional intelligence. And so if you can track it, get a cycle syncing app, and put a few things on the calendar, even if you just want to put the things that you know would support her. Like, okay, I know she needs this at this phase of the cycle. And you'd be surprised. We are always forever grateful when it's the little things.
Yes. Like it's the thoughtfulness, the attention to detail. And I guarantee if you tell her like, hey, I know like you're entering your luteal phase. So like I've planned like a cozy night in, like how much that means to a girl is like insane. I also like wanted to add on to what you're saying of like, yeah, I think this conversation is like twofold. Like, yes, it's great for a partner to listen, and also like you were saying, like it takes work on both sides. And like as a woman, I think it's so beautiful to just like, it gives you self-awareness to know like I know I'm like, okay, if I have hard conversations at work, obviously you can't avoid things in life, you can't scapegoat everything,
Right.
like you can't always control all of it, right? So like realistically sometimes we're gonna have big deadlines like in our luteal phase, and it happens. But like for the most part, if I can, I'm like, okay, if I'm the self-awareness of like, okay, I know that I deal with like, I know that I feel very pessimistic and like everything in my life is crashing down and falling apart like 5 days before my period. Let me not make any major life decisions like right before. Like it's just like the self-awareness of knowing like yourself is so beautiful. And like you said, everybody's so individual. So like start tracking. It's amazing. But to close this out, Dr. Tabitha, what is one question that you wish that people asked you more often in your practice?
I think I would double back and say, I wish women would reframe how they ask a question. And the question is, instead of moving to what's wrong with me, what is my body telling me? Because the body gives us signs. The body gives us signs consistently. And it's whether or not you're tuned in and you're paying attention. Sometimes I'm able to diagnose cancer off of a simple symptom like burping. So the more that you're in tune with what's happening in your body, the better outcomes you'll have. And the more that you lean into having compassion and care for your body, the more likely you are to reduce inflammation, have a calming spirit, and that in tune is healing as well. So lead with compassion and ask the important questions. Ask all of the questions. Question your doctor. I think a lot of times, and I think this generation, our generation, is becoming more self-aware in this, to ask the important questions and investigate. Always look for the root cause. If you come into my office and you say, oh, I have a headache, I'm not like, oh, take this aspirin. Okay, well, why are you getting a headache? Are you dehydrated? Are your hormones fluctuating? Do you have some type of toxicity, whether it's mold? Or investigate the why, treat the why. Otherwise, you're going to constantly be on pills and supplements. So be inquisitive, ask what's my body telling me. Exactly, and dealing with the side effects that come with that.
Yeah, it's like when you mask one problem with like another short-term solution, it's like now you're dealing with the effects of that and that, and all of a sudden it's like a big web. I am so grateful that there's so many incredible providers like you. And I think, in a previous episode, we may have mentioned this, but I think for people listening, like advocate for yourself and like I love what you said about like learning to trust your body and like read the signals that it gives you, because nobody knows like your body better than you do. And like if you're experiencing pain and you go to someone and they're like it's normal, or you're experiencing pain or you're experiencing symptoms like that, ask. That is so good.
For sure.
Go ahead.
And can I add one more thing?
Absolutely.
I will say, just because something is common does not mean that it's normal. So everyone in your family may have this symptom, but just because it's common does not mean it's normal. And so often we've normalized health ailments. And I'm living in the Bay Area. Everyone was on Concerta, taking prescription medication for having ADHD. And I'm like, there's something deeper here. And I'm like, oh, I just have this. I'm just going to take this prescription medication. There's something deeper there. So investigate that. Just because it's common does not mean it's normal.
I think that is, you've spit so many bars. This whole episode. There's just so much like gold nuggets throughout this whole thing. I feel like I'm going to be re-listening to this like 6 times. There is so much I want to talk to you about, particularly like PCOS, like there's so much that I feel like we like barely scratched the surface. This is like a very like good overview on just like relationships and cycle. But since for sake of time, we're going to close out today's episode. And I just wanted to leave the listener with this cycle syncing, you guys, is not just about your personal wellness, but it's about your relationships too. And when you can start to understand your body, like it impacts everything. It impacts everything in your life, your energy, your moods, your desires, and your relationship with yourself and your lover and your partner and your parents and like everyone in your life, your work. So misunderstandings can create opportunity for empathy, and frustration can become support, and intimacy can become deeper because you both feel seen, and when you know that you're putting in the effort to understand yourself and understand your partner. So if you've ever felt like your relationship struggles during certain weeks of the month, just know this: it's not always you. Sometimes it's not always your partner. Sometimes it can just be like biological shifts that are happening. And like we said from the beginning, like don't take that as a scapegoat to like for everything, but just to, like you said, understand like what is my body telling me I need right now. And when you start cycle syncing, you start saving a lot of energy, connection, and love. So if today's episode resonated with you, just make sure that you're following the show so that you never miss the conversations like this. And if you're ready to bring back cycle syncing bring cycle syncing into your relationship, download the Lively app. Lively makes it easy to track your phases and even has a partner syncing feature so that the person that you love can better understand and support you in every phase. Do you have anything else you want to say before the end of this episode?
I do not. It was great. It was fun. As you can see, I love talking. I'm such a talker.
No, that was perfect. Thank you guys so much for listening, and tune in next time on the Ask Lively podcast. Bye.